Hello. Hello. Welcome. Thank you very much for being with us here. My name is Anthony Moser. I'm the board president for Neighbors for Environmental Justice. I'm going to be welcoming you, talking a little bit about this ordinance, and then we're going to have a lot of time to talk about questions and learn more about kind of what this might mean for our community. I want to start, though, with a big thank you for our staff and volunteers who did a lot of work to make tonight happen, especially Madeline Benavides, our policy organizer, Mariah Mata Murnaromo from the Chicago Environmental Justice Network, and everybody who's been participating in the Chicago Coalition to End Sacrifice Zones. And we have a lot of great community partners in the house. Want to give it up one time for them. All right. And I'd also like to thank our elected representatives who we have here this evening. Alderwoman Ramirez, Alderwoman Lee, is Alderman Rodriguez, is he here in the house? All right, there we go, all right. And we've got Teresa Ma from the state representative here. One time for our elected representatives. Thank you so much for being here. All right, so I'm going to start out by talking about what this ordinance actually does. Let's go to the next slide. And when I say this ordinance, this is our agenda here. You can see we're going to try to keep it real quick. And that does mean that we're going to be glossing over some of the history of the policy development that brought us to this moment, but we really want to leave enough time for everybody to actually get to ask questions and engage directly. We do have a lot of additional information at these tables in the back and out there. We got a lot of smart people who love to talk about this stuff, and so if you have any questions about any of this, please find them. We're going to be hanging out, come and talk to us. We will go into as much detail as you can tolerate. So, basically, this is a zoning bill. Chicago has zoning rules that specify what you can build, where you can build it, and what kind of process you have to follow. Right now, some parts of the city are pre-approved for pollution. And what I mean by that is that you can build a warehouse or a factory without getting a city approval or having any public meetings. We'll go to the next one here. Case in point would be matte asphalt. Raise your hand if you heard of matte asphalt or you smelled them. All right. Yeah, you can tell it's a local crowd. Even though it's across the street from McKinley Park, matte asphalt is in a planned manufacturing district, a PMD, which means it is zoned for intensive manufacturing, and that is what allowed them to open without any public meetings or city approval. Next. This isn't an accident. This is a part of Chicago's history and pattern of discrimination. You can see that with matte asphalt, also with General Iron, with Hilco, with Sims Metal Management. City had to sign an agreement with the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development over this pattern. And they are still working through the requirements of that agreement. And introducing an ordinance and doing a cumulative impacts assessment is part of that. Let's go there. Also, for just as long as the city's been doing that, people have been organizing to try and stop it. This bill is named after Hazel Johnson. Her husband's death from cancer kind of turned her whole life around, and she started People for Community Recovery, which is an organization that is still fighting for environmental justice today. And they are actually part of the reason that we have this ordinance before the city council. So, what would this thing change? Basically, it would mean that developers would have to do a cumulative impacts study, asking what the project would do to the neighborhood, and specifically considering how much pollution is already there. Then they would have to meet with the neighbors to talk about the project and the study, and then they would have to get approval from the city's zoning administrator. It does a few other things as well. It creates a council that the mayor would appoint to provide guidance on environmental policy and to make recommendations about whether or not those projects ought to be approved. It would require the city to keep studying the impact of pollution in different neighborhoods, and it would create an official definition for environmental justice. But the main thing is that it would change the zoning rules. Go ahead, next one. When I say cumulative impacts, and you're going to hear that a lot tonight, all that really means is that the effects of pollution add up. You've got one truck going by, that's not going to be that bad for you. You get thousands of trucks going by every single day, and you'll see higher rates of asthma. You'll see cancer, depression, heart disease, early death. These are cumulative impacts, and that is what this ordinance is meant to address. It's trying to change the question that the city is asking, so that instead of asking how much pollution is too much for one business to produce, we want to ask how much pollution is too much for one neighborhood to breathe in. These are maps of zoning in wards 11, 12, and 22. We do have paper copies of these at the front table from when you came in. We also have them online. We've made one for every ward if you want to send them to your friends so they can see. Everything that's highlighted here is an area that is currently zoned for by right development of either warehouses, factories, or both. That's Iron Lab right there in the middle of the big yellow PMD where we are right now. Let's go to the next one. Now, we are here tonight to have an honest conversation. And I think we all know that just because the city has a meeting doesn't mean that they're going to listen to what people said. And there are plenty of projects that did require approval from the city and got it, even when the neighbors didn't like it. But it does mean that you won't learn about it after it's built, like we did with Matt Asphalt. It means that we have a chance to organize, to engage, and to find out what's happening before things are already done to our community. And for the first time, it requires the city to consider how much pollution is already there before they approve any more. Let's go to the next one. I want to highlight that this is not a theoretical question. Raise your hand if you heard of the Damon Silos. I'm not going to ask if you went to a party there. Michael Taden, who owns Matt Asphalt, bought the Damon Silos. There's another meeting happening tomorrow. It's going to be the final one the city holds before the silos are demolished. We don't know what he's going to build there because he will not tell us. But I can tell you that right now, it sits in PMD 11A, which means that it is also zoned for heavy industry, and it does not need any approval for heavy manufacturing. This ordinance could change that. So, that's really the core of it. That's really what we're here to talk about. And to put this in a little bit more context, I'm going to turn it over now to Myrna Romo, so she can come up here and explain a little bit more about the human impact.
Ooh, this is a packed house. I'm a little nervous, so don't mind me. Oh my gosh! Thank you all so much. So my name is Mirna Salgado Romo. I'm a resident of Chicago, born and raised, a resident of the South Side for all my life. I got involved in this work. I actually was working in education for over 15 years. And I got involved in this work when Matt Asphalt came into our community in our neighborhood. Just wanted to share an experience that I had personally in working in education. I was working in the front office for office administration, working with operations, and one of my roles was to assist students who had ailments and who had any medical conditions. And in the 10 years that I worked in one of the schools in our community, if you can go to the slide with the schools. In one of the schools in this community, after 10 years, I started to notice the amount of students that were coming in with more and more asthma cases every year after year. And when Matt Asphalt came into our community, it was definitely something that raised concerns to me because I worked at a school that focused on the holistic approach of educating the child, which meant that they encouraged them to be outdoors, to be part of nature, to be actively engaging in their environment and seeing that as a wellness for their health. My students would go to the park, McKinley Park, and for various reasons, they would come back tired. They would come back having difficulty breathing. And a lot of these families did not know or realize that some of their students were, in fact, asthmatic. And so in my personal experience, that was something that was concerning. And unfortunately, we didn't have the resources. We don't have the understanding of how these impacts are affecting our kids. But that was my firsthand experience in a school environment, working with children, and where I started to see personally how these things were affecting our residents in our community. I also have a mother who passed away a couple years ago now, who had difficulty with ALS. I have to say that I was blessed because she had this illness for 20 years, and typically with a person who has ALS, they last for 5 years, up to 5-year lifespan. But we took really good care of her. And I do have to say that for people who are living with ailments and diseases, being outdoors in an environment that is congested with traffic, or that there are factories or facilities that are spewing out pollution in the air, it creates a more difficult ability for them to be able to breathe. And so we didn't spend a lot of time outdoors because either of the humidity or because of things that were affecting their breathing. That is one of the main things that goes when you have ALS, is your ability to breathe. And I'm not saying that that's what caused it. What I'm saying is that it affected her quality of life to be able to be outdoors and to enjoy their quality of life. I'm also unfortunately, I have lots of stories to tell, which I'm sure can probably relate to a lot of people here. My husband was diagnosed with cancer, who also has a facility that, similar to the one that we're currently working in trying to create more processes to ensure that the people have good working conditions, but not just the people that work in those environments, but also the people who live in the surrounding areas. And we currently live in an area where there is a lot of industry, and there is a lot of ways in which we can start to work together to figure out solutions and understand the different impacts of those issues and how we can either mitigate or reduce them being clustered in one particular area. And so I share my stories because I think they relate to a lot of people going through these things, and I think it's important for us to communicate those things to people who are creating policies and who are engaging our communities and who are trying to make changes in our places of living. And so just wanted to show this map Sonia, thank you so much for putting this together. Just shows how many schools are in McKinley Park itself. And so if this policy would have been in existence before it was permitted and before they built their facility, they would have taken all of these schools into consideration as factors as to why they shouldn't have this facility in this neighborhood. We have 14 schools, 6 daycares. I mean, that's a lot. I have my nieces go to Little Tykes on Pershing, and it really sucks to have to see that when they're outside, like sometimes they have to be brought indoors because the quality of air is not good and it's too cumbersome for them to be able to breathe. Let me not mention Velma Thomas. Velma Thomas, they're little babies that are like 3-year-olds to 4 are also walking to the park, and sometimes we've had complaints of them not something that we are just, it's not just another level of difficulty that we're trying to put on industries to come in and put their shops up. It is a thing that we're trying to establish in order for them to understand and take into consideration all of these factors that are affecting the quality of life of the people who are living around them. And it's too late for us now with matte asphalt, but going forward, we're hoping that we can prevent this from happening in neighborhoods and that they take the cumulative burden and the cumulative impacts into consideration before giving them a permit. Because it's not okay for our babies that are 3, 4 years old or our elderly who are having difficulty breathing for them to have to deal with this on a daily basis. And so just wanted to share some of my personal experiences, and I'm sure they relate with a lot of people here, and we would love to hear your stories because we need to really engage our elected officials and say, hey, enough is enough. We've never had this process before. This is something that's really going to start to help us, and we're excited about this because now you actually have to take into consideration the changes of the environment, the changes of the climate, the changes of the city, and this should have already been in this process, and this is a misstep. This is a misstep that that should have taken into consideration. When you're taking into consideration economic development, it's already being taken into consideration. They're getting priority. When are residents going to get priority?
Hi, all. It's so good to see so many people here. My heart is so full at this time where local action is more important than ever. I'm going to try to be quick. If we could move to the next slide. I guess first I'll share some of my own personal experience of living about 1/3 of a mile away from matte asphalt. I often deal with noxious smells of asphalt, not only outdoors, but in my apartment as well. So it's not uncommon for me to wake up to asphalt fumes in my home that quickly become the first thought that I have. I'm not even awake yet. I'll be half asleep. My brain will process the smell of asphalt, then I'll open my eyes. It's a very strong experience. I'm sure a lot of you that live in McKinley Park have felt the same thing. And yeah, on heavy days, the fumes will make me queasy, and they're sometimes strong enough to burn your eyes. This often comes with a certain kind of headache and a feeling that your throat will close. And all of this to say that I don't know how this is affecting my health. I think safe to say it's not good. There's a lot of different sources of pollution that we're surrounded by all the time. But I do know that those health impacts are multiplied in my community by everyone there that's in my community. So these issues are really important, obviously. I can make guesses as to how this is affecting my health, but there are plenty of studies that are very clear about the fact that it's not good. So we don't have the clearest answers. We don't have all the data in the world, but I know that I love my neighbors and that we're in this all together. Yeah, so let's talk about air quality. I'm going to try to be brief about this and just give a rundown about air quality and the climate of air monitoring in Chicago. If we can go to the next slide. So most of what we know of as air quality comes from this EPA Air Now program. If you're looking at air quality on your weather app, it's likely coming from the city's it's not the cities, it's the EPA and the IEPA's 6 monitors scattered throughout Chicago. These instruments measure particulate matter, that's the tiny bits of stuff that we're breathing. They're not measuring what that stuff is. None of that stuff is good, I can tell you that. These monitors also measure ozone. And so this is information, that's the information that we currently have about how air quality affects us and how it's gathered. And I just want to say that the closest EPA monitors from where we are here now are almost 5 miles away. So as you might imagine, there's large gaps in the south of Chicago and southwest Chicago where pollution is the worst. So unfortunately, we have these data gaps where we need this information the most. Next slide, please. So this is a quick rundown of what AQI stands for. You probably see that a lot. It's an air quality index, and it's a way of reporting air quality so people can make healthy decisions about how to go about their day. Does anyone know like what range we're in today, our air quality? Did anyone look at what? Moderate, yeah, it's moderate, which is not good. The health advisory for moderate, or the recommendation, is that sensitive individuals should avoid outdoor activity as they may experience respiratory symptoms. So a lot of people aren't aware of these recommendations and they just go about their lives without this information. And you know, I'm sure you know all about how air pollution is linked to asthma, heart disease, premature death, the list goes on of the negative health effects of air pollution. And it affects vulnerable people like children, the elderly, outdoor workers, and local sources of pollution right here where we are surrounding us. We are surrounded by industrial corridors, as you likely know. So we're getting pollution from traffic, industry, diesel trucks, etc. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about what we don't know about air quality in Chicago. Thank you. Which is a lot. We don't know a lot. So these EPA air monitors, they're the ones that are considered regulatory level air monitors. So luckily, you know, a lot of community groups have installed community level air monitors. Like shout out to a lot of you that are working on that right now. But the data that they produce is not considered valid by scientific and by regulatory standards. So there's a problem there, considering that these monitors are 5 miles away from where we are now. So these monitors aren't capturing the hyper-local pollution. An example is an industry called Innova Flavors that's 1,700 feet from here, really close. It's in this complex, like right on Ashland. It smells like random food products, not a good smell, 24/7. You may have smelled it when you came in here. And every once in a while, it'll smell like burning dog food. I've heard it explained a lot of different ways, but they have these burns when they're maintaining their facilities that reek, and like literally my throat will feel like it is closing up. I have never been diagnosed with asthma, and I can like feel the effects instantly. That's not going to show up on any of these EPA regulatory monitors. So yes, we need more information about air quality, but even more, we need more meaningful actions to take about the data. We already know the air quality is bad. So yes, data is important, but the question, what does data do? What can it do for us is even more important. So hopefully, you know, with the different systems of air monitoring that are happening in the city, things can get better, but more so, we need more regulatory action to be taken. And this ordinance is a great example of a step towards that. Next slide. So here's some quick action steps that you could take. We're all air monitors in a way. You can report odors and air pollution from your phone, describe it in detail. This link, smellsbad.today, will take you to the form for 311 that's complaining about air pollution to the city, and also the IEPA's complaint line. They are obligated to send an inspector. They don't always do it, but a lot of the times they do. You could also suggest a location for a city air monitor. Right now, the city has a project right now where they're putting up clarity monitors citywide. It's really exciting. Again, these monitors won't be used for regulatory level data, so that's something to consider. But it's a positive thing, and we have in Espanol and in Chinese links to be able to suggest a location for a city air monitor. Also, if you're curious what other people have suggested, there's a way to download a file of that, which I think is pretty cool. And like I mentioned before, we have these community level air monitors called Purple Air monitors. Has anyone heard of the Purple Air sensors? Cool. Yeah, most likely if you live in an EJ neighborhood right now, there's an organization that will help you get a monitor installed. Luckily, there's funding for that right now. So this is just an open invitation to reach out to either us and for EJ, Pero, El Vejo. Yeah, we're ready and willing and excited to work together with you, just to try to figure out like how to deal with these gaps about information about air quality. And next, Caro is gonna talk about diesel and truck pollution. Thanks so much for being here, y'all. I'm Sonia from N4EJ. Yeah.
Hi everyone, how's everyone doing? I feel like a stand-up comedian. I won't be doing any jokes. Oh yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm also a little nervous. My Fitbit just congratulated me for meeting my target heart rate, and I was just sitting down. But yeah, my name is Carolina Macias. I work with the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization, and I'm the Senior Mobility Justice Research Organizer. Thank you so much for joining us for this important conversation. And I'll be talking about diesel. Okay, so really quickly, raise your hand if you have noticed any large trucks moving through your community. All of us. Raise your hand if you've tried to count how many trucks you see. Maybe at the bus stop, waiting for that 30-minute bus to get there. Raise your hand if you've gotten stuck in traffic behind a diesel truck and just noticed a bad smell. Okay, raise your hand if you've noticed how loud diesel trucks are. They're pretty loud. And lastly, raise your hand if you or someone you know suffer from asthma or other respiratory diseases. Yeah, that's a lot of us. So we have normalized truck activity in our communities, right? And so even the thought about counting trucks seems like a wild idea. And so I'll be talking a little bit about our truck counting project that we did last year. Next slide. So Cook County is one of the counties with the worst diesel pollution in America. This data was released by our comrades at the Respiratory Health Association. Specifically, transportation is known to be one of the major sources of air pollution. And specifically, diesel trucks released harmful pollution into the air, such as nitrogen oxide and particulate matter 2.5, which is one of the most hazardous contaminants because it can literally enter your bloodstream. And so, as we have talked about cumulative impacts, right, and the cumulative and regular exposure to PM 2.5 is linked to respiratory diseases, which doesn't just impact residents who are breathing in the fumes, it also impacts truck workers or dock workers that are often the ones closest to the fumes. Next slide, please. Really quickly, diesel exhaust impacts our health. You can see some immediate reactions such as irritation of the eyes, your nose, throat, and lungs, as well as coughing, headaches, or nausea. Over time, and again, the cumulative exposure to PM 2.5 and other and diesel exhaust can potentially lead to cancer, lung cancer, bladder cancer. It worsens allergies. It can also cause asthma and other lung illnesses and heart disease. Next slide, please. And so we also wanted to share some data points on asthma, particularly in Chicago. A lot of you raised your hands when I asked if you yourself knew about someone who has asthma or respiratory issues. In Chicago alone, there's over 200,000 adults who have asthma. 13.9 of Black adults have asthma compared to 8.4 white adults. So you can already see a huge difference there. Specifically, Black children are 4 times more likely to go to the emergency room due to a respiratory health-related issue than white children. And then Hispanic children are 30 times more likely to go to the emergency room than white children. And as you can see here on the map to your right, we know that diesel pollution doesn't impact everyone across the city equally. It particularly impacts folks on the south and west sides of our city. A lot of our communities, as you saw by the map that Anthony showed earlier, have been zoned for industrial use. And so as you have more manufacturing companies opening, as you have more warehousing, these facilities are attracting diesel trucks into their facilities that are then using not just main roads, but also residential areas to move their trucks around. Next slide, please. And so about 2 years ago, El Vejo partnered with CNT to try to understand how the magnitude of trucking activity in our communities. The city does have a portal. However, I think the last time that portal was updated was about 10 years ago. So I should also give the background story, because truck counting actually at El Vejo started longer than 2 years ago. There was a facility, am I speaking too loudly, too close to the mic? Thank you. There was a facility in Little Village that was looking to expand. This is Unilever, located on 26 and Costner. And so what the young people at the organization wanted to do, they wanted to understand how many trucks were already circulating their homes, their schools, their parks. And so they stood on different corners throughout the neighborhood with pen and paper, and they stood there for hours just counting the amount of trucks that would pass through. And so it's beautiful to see how that initiative that was led by our youth grew into the Chicago Truck Count portal that you can visit, chicagotruckcounts.cnt.org. And so what we did, we worked with a transportation consultant that installed traffic cameras in over 35 different locations. We were very specific about the locations because we wanted to ensure that we accounted for locations that were near schools, near parks, near residential areas, and that were also had some kind of proximity to intermodal facilities or expressways. And so feel free to go to the website, to the portal. You can pull up a lot of the data from the website. But here I wanted to just highlight 3 different locations. One location being South Lawndale and La Villita, on the corner of Pulaski and 36. We counted 3,878. I need the glasses, sorry. And then, and I'm sorry, this is over a 24-hour period. And so then Brighton Park, on the corner, I'm sorry, this is Cordwith Intermodal Facility. This is their driveway. We counted 2,915 trucks in 24 hours. And then in McKinley Park, at the corner of Ashland and West 35th Street, we counted 4,884 trucks. So this is only 24 hours, right? I'm not a mathematician, so you can pull up your calculators. How many is that in 7 days? And then how many trucks is it in 30? And then in a year, right? And so if you start thinking about the amount of years that you or your loved ones have lived in these communities, just think about the cumulative exposure that you have had to diesel exhaust. So yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Caro, and our presenters. We are now going to move to a panel, so we're going to do some setup and chair moving. Please take this time. If you need the restrooms, they're in the back right corner through the door. We have more food, water, beverages, and I think popsicles over here to your right. If you need to stretch your legs, we're going to take about 5 minutes to set up. If you didn't see when you came in, there's a small table with paper. We would love to hear your stories. They could be anonymous. Share your stories about encountering air pollution. We also have Elizabeth from our advisory council here available at the end of the meeting if you'd like to record a video, or we would love to hear your story, your personal story. It means so much. It translates to everyone if you're willing to do that. So again, please help yourself to a drink if you didn't get one at the beginning. And we are going to set up for this panel and Q&A, so you have a chance to ask your questions. And if the panelists can make their way to the front, please.
This is ELP, MPC. I can get the panelists if I need to.
For the Zoom, if people have questions, I'll just raise my hand at the end and ask for them. Does that sound good, or do we want to be mindful?
Is there a mic that is movable? Are we going to have, for questions, people come up to the mic if you have a question? Okay. You will want to say that. Okay. And if they can't come to the mic?
Got questions? Check. Check. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2 1 2. Check, check. Check, check. Check 1 2 1 2 1 2. Check, check. There we go. Check. Let's split the difference. We want it like high enough that people don't lean over to use these ever.
Lina? Yeah, Lina. Susan, Susan. No, okay, Lina. She wasn't here, but she's having for a trip to go to Massachusetts. I saw her at the Transfer Chicago conference a few weeks ago. Okay. Literally didn't use it. She's not here. But we improvise. Improvise. Yeah. This is learning again. What was the first one? No, it was about, they had like its own business and some three different type of, what, I forget what it was called. Yeah, this was the opportunity to like the findings and assessment. That was the one involving the tuition portion. Yeah, that's what it was.
What's up? How are you?
Yeah, are you?
Good. Good. How are you doing, Chris?
Good, how are you?
Good. It's nice to see you in real life,
Yeah, sorry,
and not just on a Zoom screen.
Okay, no,
Angela, nice to meet you, yeah. And,
Yeah.
it's the commissioner.
Yeah.
I see people faces, you know, the computer screen. Oh, it's a video?
Okay. Yeah.
Checking, check, testing.
Take two.
Testing.
all right, if we can have everybody make your way back to your seat, please. I can do a really high trill if you want me to.
We're ready to begin the panel. If we could get everybody to come back to their seat, please.
That's right.
Come on back. It's the part you've all been waiting for.
Yeah. If everybody can take their seats, please, we're ready to get started with our panel. Come on back and find a seat. You can pick one of the cubes if you had a chair and vice versa. All right. Woo. Thank you again, everybody. We're going to get started with our panel, so please have a seat. You think I would be louder? All of my sisters are teachers, but I don't have the teacher voice. So. All right. Thank you again, everyone, for coming. We know you took time out of your schedule. You found parking in this very challenging area that has a pop-up construction site happening. We appreciate all of you getting here, how you came. We have this fabulous panel here, and I'm going to read off and introduce them. And then we have time for Q&A for your questions. And we're going to turn this mic out if Myrna is going to be our facilitator. And if you have questions, we'd love for you to come up to the mic if you can. We also have folks on Zoom who may have questions during Q&A, so we're going to try and address some of those and go real hybrid here. So thank you again. I'd like to introduce Myrna, who you know is going to be our facilitator for this panel. We also have, starting on this side, is Mimi Hueracocha, the National Health Systems Improvement Director at the American Lung Association. Next up is Angela Tovar, the Chief Sustainability Officer and in charge of the Chicago Department of the Environment. After that is Chris Tiongson, Research and Evaluation Manager at the Metropolitan Planning Council. And then finally, Alice Walton, Associate Attorney at the Environmental Law and Policy Center. So please welcome our panel, and Myrna, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you all so much. I am very much out of my comfort zone, but this is the only way. If I could do it, you could do it. If I could do it, you could do it. So here we are. So I just wanted to remind everyone that we have, lots of opinions, lots of thoughts, and we want to be very respectful to everybody's contribution to what we're doing here today. And we just wanted to remind folks to please not interrupt, please don't interrupt, and please be very respectful to each other. We'll get started. Do we have any questions? First question on a Zoom call.
Thank you, Mirna. So our first question is from Catherine Telluck from Chicago Environmentalists. They say, I would like to know if any other major U.S. cities have adopted an ordinance like this one, and if so, is there data to show its impact over time?
I think Angela's got an answer. Yes.
Yeah, I can.
You want to take that one?
Yeah, I can start it off. There have been cities and states who've enacted cumulative impacts laws. In recent years, New Jersey and the state of Minnesota have both enacted their own statewide cumulative impacts law where they're requiring Clean Air Act facilities, or regulators are requiring Clean Air Act facilities to conduct a cumulative impact study before they permit facilities in environmental justice communities. And in the New Jersey case that I really like about them is they actually say that if a facility is getting permitted in an environmental justice community and it has a significant adverse impact against them, then the permit has to be denied unless there's some other type of compelling interest to happen. And so that's only been enacted, I think, for the last 2 years or so. In Minnesota, they recently enacted theirs, I want to say a year or two ago, and they're currently in rulemaking. So they do exist outside of Chicago, and the progress is, it's still sort of being assessed, but other jurisdictions are definitely doing it.
very exciting. So it's new. This is happening, but it's happening slowly, and this is why it's important for us to start to really gain some momentum here. Angela, did you want to add anything?
Sure. I would just add that the city of Newark has a cumulative impacts ordinance, and so does the city of Los Angeles uses what the state has, which is called Cal EnviroScreen, to identify areas that are most vulnerable to pollution. The city uses that data to identify what they call green zones, so areas where they have that they deploy equitable strategies to try to mitigate pollution, and also where they designate areas for deeper investments. So that's underway there. The Newark model is similar to what we are looking to pursue here. We talked to them at great length to determine what was working, what was not working, to try to build a stronger policy than what they have in Newark.
Do we have any follow-up questions?
Can you describe what the cumulative impact study will require? Because that's not found here, and apparently it's up to your office to, that's the it of this whole thing, and it's not described.
Yes. Right. So the cumulative impact study is within the ordinance. We will have time to build that out. We are actively working with an engineering firm now to be able to build that methodology that's consistent with the way that the health department promulgates their rules. It's very common to pass a policy and then to put forth the rules. There will be a 30-day comment period. There will be deep engagement around the cumulative impacts assessment before it goes into final rulemaking. So the cumulative impacts assessment is going to look at a number of different factors. So if you look at the broader cumulative impacts study, right, we're looking at health, environmental, and broader social stressors to identify areas that are most vulnerable to pollution. So when you look at the policy, you have to think about taking into consideration the local context, right? So it's a more comprehensive evaluation. Right now, the way that our policy is drafted currently, we look at air and air impacts, so particulate matter and understanding air burden. That's an evaluation that goes to CDPH. There is also a traffic congestion study, which is provided to CDOT. So these are things that are happening in a vacuum, right? Each department is looking at one condition. The cumulative impacts, what it's proposing is to say, hey, let's look at all of these environmental and health stressors comprehensively and have both of the departments look at them together so that we can identify how to mitigate and provide solutions here. The other important thing is that it takes into context the surrounding community as well. So that's the best that I can describe it now. And like I said, there is an engineering firm that is supporting us to develop the study, so there'll be more information soon.
Thank you, Angela. And definitely processing.
Yes.
The question is, what is the name of the engineering firm?
The name of the engineering firm is Tetra Tech. Sure. T-E-T-R-A, and then separate word T-E-C-H.
Since our community already has a high level of pollution, why doesn't the city turn and say, these are the green areas of Chicago that don't have pollution, and have the new companies go there?
I don't know if that's what we want to do. think that we want to try to mitigate pollution as much as possible. And so putting this burden on other people is not what we're seeking to achieve here. But we are. They'll put, that's a good point. They'll put us there. So, and next question?
So we've talked about how we weren't able to stop the matte asphalt and the pollution that's already been wrought on our community. But have there been any instances in the past where companies have been forced to pay reparations for the damage that they've caused to people's health? Because there's a lot of cost that this community has dealt with as a result of this pollution, healthcare costs at the very least. And I was wondering if there had been any success with policies in the past for making companies pay back for the damage that they caused.
Yeah, to my knowledge, there is not a policy in place that requires companies to pay reparations for the damages that have come as an outcome of bad performance.
How does the city of Chicago's sort of zoning and PMD industrial districts compare to other peer cities' zoning and manufacturing districts, like historically and also kind of currently?
I can share, just in my evaluation of cumulative impacts, both New York City and Los Angeles have similar land use requirements. So they have these areas that have clusters of industrial activity, and in those areas that typically contributes to higher pollution and has a direct impact on the surrounding communities. New York City, to my knowledge, I worked there for a very long time. They do not have a policy on the books to address this. That is something that the EJ community has also wanted for a long time. I think people, around the country are very hopeful for the type of ordinance that we're here to discuss today, but that is not something that is being pursued to date. The big challenge is a challenge that is similar to the challenges here. There are areas of New York City that are zoned, that are called significant maritime industrial areas. So not only are they clusters of pollution, but they're right on the water. So when you think about, flood vulnerability, there's a real issue that people have been highlighting about, not only are we vulnerable to pollution in these communities, but we're also flood vulnerable, and there's the potential for, a flood event or a hurricane to hit here, and for these chemicals to pour out into this already, impacted community, and that's a real challenge there. But they've had a lot of difficulty with, putting forth an ordinance. Of course, there's a lot of resistance to an ordinance like this, and so it's been challenging for them to move ahead. LA, a similar situation in terms of having clusters of industrial. Of course, as we know, LA also has oil drilling issues, right? There's active oil drilling within the city limits, which is a real challenge. And so their environmental issues are plenty, there are many environmental issues that environmental justice communities are grappling with in LA. Similarly, the city decided to go with the investment route to prioritize those areas for investment rather than the policy route, because I think that it's difficult to pass a policy like this.
Hi. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, the ordinance is kind of a way to keep the city accountable to pursue this study, right? So I guess that sounds important if we're going to engage this work at a citywide level, right? My first question is if you could comment on the resistance that you're facing, it'd be interesting to know as a citizen. And then two, as a citizen, what kind of engagement is impactful in order to help pass the ordinance so that this can be pursued at a higher level, a more united level?
Yeah, so I think in terms of resistance, I wouldn't say that there are individuals or people today that are outright against this ordinance. I think that people, of course, have some concerns, right? Largely, the concerns that we've heard are about economic activity, and people feeling very strongly that they want to maintain a robust industrial economy within the city of Chicago. That has been the main bread and butter for many communities for a very long time. And so it's difficult for people to, support ordinances that they perceive as being a threat to the well-being of those economies. From our perspective, we don't see that as the case, of course. And, we want to create opportunities for clean technologies to come to the city, to continue to build, workforce that is more consistent with the types of businesses that we want to see within the city of Chicago. And so, we want to be supportive of economic growth here as well, but not at the expense of people's health. And I think that that's super important. That's a super important distinction. So it's a matter of, having really tough conversations with people to clear, their concerns and to continue to work toward alignment on the policy.
Hi, I'm Teresa McNamara. I'm with the Southwest Environment Alliance. I am against this ordinance. I'm against it because it doesn't cover our children that have asthma. It doesn't cover my husband that has AFib. It doesn't cover the people that have had heart attacks or strokes. This ordinance is for newcomers. It doesn't cover our asses, people. It doesn't cover us. It's very weak. And I would ask, why did they spend so much money, so much time on putting something together that will go towards new companies instead of the companies that we're fighting against? Hilco, Sims, Med Asphalt, all of these companies that we are dealing with every single day. We all need to be upset that we are not being listened to. We did not get to see this ordinance before they put it in front of the council. There are three of us that were on the EEWG. We were not told about a meeting that they had, that maybe they did have, we don't know. But people have told us that there was a meeting, but we were not informed. Do you know why? Maybe it's because the way I think. I think we should all be covered. If an ordinance is going down, if money is being spent for our communities, we should be asking where is it going and how is it going to protect our children now, today. I don't want to wait 3 more years for them to say, okay, now let's sit down and see what else do we want to do when this ordinance should be covering our asses today. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa.
That actually, I think, does raise a good question. Does any part of this cover or apply to existing facilities, and under what circumstances would that happen?
So it would apply to existing facilities if they were expanding. And, I just want to respond by saying, I definitely understand your concern. Teresa, you and I have had many hours of conversations about your concerns, and I want to recognize that because I think it's important. I know that you're feeling frustrated that this ordinance doesn't cover everything that you want, but I also want to acknowledge and recognize that there are hundreds of organizers in this room that we have been working with as a coalition to build this ordinance. And so, to say that this ordinance is weak, you're not only, pushing back against the city, you are pushing back against the organizations that have been working tirelessly with us to co-develop an ordinance. And so I just want to recognize that there are many people in this room who have been working daily basis, on a weekly basis, all years, to get us where we are. And I know that this isn't everything, and I know that that's frustrating for you. Policies are tough to pass. You know, we have to understand that there is a political climate here in the city and in every city where, big policy omnibuses that do everything that you want in one ordinance typically aren't politically viable. And it does take continued work, and that's work that we've committed to. We've never shied away from continuing this work, and we've had conversations with your organization to demonstrate what we are doing, where we've made investments, where we are doing new programming, where we are, this is our policy push that we're trying to pursue here. And I hope that you guys will continue to hear me. I see that you're walking out. Yes. So I just hope that you don't discount the organizing and the work that has taken place with people here, because that's important.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we agreed that we were going to be respectful and we were not going to be talking over one another. So please, she's walking away and we're trying to give her the answers that she's seeking without her listening. So we're trying to ensure that she's listening to the answers that we're sharing. I did want to add, I think, we just shared, the first question was, one of the first questions that was raised was, what is the resistance that we're feeling right now in trying to get this watered down ordinance? That's already challenging in itself. If that's already challenging in itself, if we're going after all of industry, are we gonna get what we're asking for? Or should we start with something and then work our way up to prove that this works, to prove that we can get to that point of starting to address the existing facilities?
The challenge you all had, if you remember, had to come from HUD. HUD was
I got it.
blacks and brown communities were being discriminated against.
Yes.
Is it still happening with this ordinance? It's very little, guys. Very little.
Can I also just want to say a few words here? Teresa, you and I know each other for a while. So if we want to talk about enforcement, if we want to talk about implementation of these policies, you know that M4EJ is working on building out reports that speak to that. This ordinance, it speaks to a zoning process that has nothing to do with enforcement, because I think that many of us already know that enforcement division is within CDPH. I think that if people are interested in helping us to hold these polluters accountable, there's an enforcement mechanism, right? There's ways to implement this, but there's a different conversation. This work that we have done with the zoning ordinance here, to us, it is substantial in the sense that we're trying to reduce and prevent more pollution coming into our communities. Unfortunately, I think that many of us already know here that we don't have the economic power, that we don't have the political will, and I think that's what we are trying to do here with our community organizing, to continue to bring awareness to these issues so that we can build that power and that we can eventually implement a policy that can start to really help us address these polluters. So I think that with all due respect to Teresa's perspective, because I also share your sentiments in so many ways, but I think that we also need to be very careful in the way that we are coming in organizing, because at the end of the day, it requires a lot of capacity. It requires a lot of work. So I think that for us, how can we really understand to work together, to have a mutual understanding so that we can be in better alignment, so that we can be more creative with our solutions in addressing these issues. But that's where we are.
Hi. So it seems like one of the biggest problems for pollution in our neighborhoods are the diesel trucks and also diesel locomotives. Is there, and this is something that would clear up our current problems if we could reduce that. Is there anything in this process, and I realize it's limited what it can do, but is there something in this process that can help force the transition to electric trucks and electric locomotives, and/or other things that the city can do to leverage, approval of changes that the railroads want at any given point, or whatever? And I don't know if any of that relates to this, but it seems like we got to approach all of that.
Yeah, so within this process, within the proposed process, this is an evaluation to better understand a proposed development and weigh that against the context of the surrounding community. So certainly, if large facilities that have fleet yards, warehouses as well, that's always a concern for folks about the traffic impacts related to trucks. That it would be subject to this ordinance, and certainly a proposal that showed zero emissions fleet would be weighed against that as a mitigation measure. So that would help to advance clean energy solutions like zero emission trucks, electric trucks as well.
Do we have any health questions? I definitely,
So we have a question in the Zoom chat regarding lung disease and asthma. Is there data demonstrating an increasing impact on the numbers of people affected with asthma? What, if any, is the American Lung Association role in the development of the ordinance to establish parameters regarding human health impact?
All right, I'm going to start with the last part, which seemed to be about our involvement as the American Lung Association in the ordinance's creation or enforcement. And we just are signing on right now, so we're just joining the table of conversations for it, but we are endorsing the ordinance as the American Lung Association, which is the leading lung health organization in the country. And we have been doing this for 120 plus years. Our mission really is to defeat lung disease all over the country through different imperatives like defeating lung cancer, making sure that we minimize lung disease, and that there is clean and healthy, safe air for every person. And we do that through advocacy, through research, and through programming. So I just wanted to establish that, the last question. And I think and you can repeat the question at the beginning for me, please.
Yes, so the first question is regarding lung disease and asthma, is there data demonstrating an increasing impact on the numbers of people affected with asthma?
So our asthma rates going up. So they've been kind of around the same, steady in terms of in Illinois. We do have information too, if people want to go to lung.org/asthma, where we do compile specific information. I will take this moment to say that the burden of asthma in the city of Chicago, like in the state of Illinois and across the country, is really disproportionate. It impacts, like we saw earlier, right, communities of color, communities that are low income, and because of this, also, there's already pre-existing conditions, if you can call them that, like asthma. Really, it's the current and also the legacy of racist policies and practices, right, that have led to that disproportionate impact of asthma in communities, right? Whether it's zoning, whether it's housing and land costs, and so people already have pre-existing risk factors for the impacts of environmental pollution and air pollution. So not only are they going to have increased pollution, but they also have increased environmental risks that will make them more vulnerable to that pollution, right? And so something that I also wanted to highlight, because I think someone earlier had talked about like how does Chicago compare to other cities. One of the signature reports that the Lung Association puts out every year is called the State of the Air. And I do have these fact sheets if you wanted to look at them. They're on the table if you want to grab them on your way out. Chicago is the 15th most polluted city in America out of all the cities. That is really bad. And we actually, sadly, have actually gotten a little bit worse. We got failing grades for both particulate pollution as well as ozone pollution. We're also the 13th most polluted by year-round particles. So when you think about this, Chicago is already at a place where we are experiencing a lot of pollution that is impacting us and our communities of color. It is not just about asthma. To Teresa's point, it's also about cardiac disease. right? There's all these other things that are going to be impacted by this. And so I think at the American Lung Association, the reason why we're endorsing this is because we believe that it's going to help us to get the measures in place to prevent, just like we have been fighting for net zero. Someone talked about trucking, right? We've been part of the coalition for net zero emissions because we know through our Zeroing In on Healthy Air report that Illinois would actually gain a lot from having net zero, right? And so this is a part of that broader process of using legislation to help us keep pollution curbed in the city of Chicago and especially in our communities of color that are impacted by asthma and other diseases too, not just asthma, cardiac disease, lung cancer, COPD, and other things too.
Mimi, I wanted to touch base on something that you said, the disproportionate people who are being affected by the lung disease right now. What demographics or what kind of can you share a little bit of that?
Yeah, I mean, so people in Chicago, the people that we see the highest rates are Black individuals as well as Latino, Hispanic, and of that, actually nationwide, if you didn't know, actually Puerto Ricans have higher rates of asthma than any other ethnic group specifically to that level. And then, yeah, so that's really it. And also people that are in low-income communities. It's kind of like everything. If you superimpose the asthma rates and the ER visits map to the map of where people live based on their socioeconomic status or even people of color, they're pretty much the same.
And I do want to also highlight that one of the things that I noticed as working in administration was that a lot of these individuals who have these ailments go undiagnosed on a regular basis because it's either un golpe de aire, which is what a lot of people, Latino people say, or they don't have the resources to be able to go to hospitals or doctors, get referrals and things of that nature. So it's really important that we understand that being the 15th highest is pretty daunting. And so I hope that we can also understand that this is a goal of us trying to achieve lower pollution in our city. Questions? Had lots of hands raised. Here and then
Thank you. Love to provide a comment and then a question. I'll be brief. My name is Hannah. I'm the founder and co-lead of Bridgeport Environmentalists. I also work for the Illinois Environmental Council. Oh, higher? Is that better? Okay, thank you. I want to firstly express a lot of support for the ordinance. I've read the text. I think it's incredibly well crafted and want to give a shout out to all the environmental justice organizations who put so much work into creating it. I think it moves us in a lot of really good directions, creating concrete steps to protect our people from new and increasing health hazards. In terms of my question, I would love to hear from the panel about what the implementation process, particularly things like timeline, after the hopeful passage of this ordinance would look like.
Sure. So in terms of timeline, we first have to pass the ordinance, and that's really important. And I know part of the reason why we're here is because we're asking folks, whether this is your first time or you're already a supporter of the ordinance, to call your alder to express support. We have to build enough votes for passage. I do want to recognize that we've had several alders and elected officials in the room today. I think that that's important. Some who have come out to support and some who are genuinely interested in learning more, and we really appreciate them being here to be a part of that discussion. And so, the first focus is passage. This is a top priority for the administration to pass that as soon as possible. That is something that Mayor Johnson has said, that this is a mayoral priority for this year. So we'd like to get it passed as soon as possible, recognizing that there's still some work that we have to do in terms of getting, this prepared for passage and ready and enough votes. Once it is passed, as we mentioned before, there is a rules promulgation process, right? A promulgation just means a posting or finalizing of rules. So the required study, that is something that is underway now. We are prioritizing that study as well, putting the foot on the gas to be able to have that study ready for public comment and additional engagement so that we can put the ordinance together. There is also a really important element of the ordinance that is an advisory board made up primarily of people from impacted communities. One of the things that we've talked about throughout this development process was just There are different sector leaders that have, city officials on speed dial, right? And can weigh in at any time to say, we don't like this development or we want to do this. Community residents don't have that privilege. And so how can we create a democratic process by which people can weigh in to continue to hold the city accountable on future policies, as well as review and provide feedback on this policy as well. And that's really important element of that. So it's a matter of getting that board set up too. So not a full answer in terms of, hard deadlines, but just a layout of like what the next steps will be, which are really important and, are things that we want to prioritize for this year.
And currently, this ordinance is sitting in rules.
Correct.
And then we'll hopefully get it to its
So my name is Mike. I genuinely appreciate the work people are doing at all levels, whether you're part of an organization or whether you're a neighbor, talking to your neighbor. Because we live where we live, we are all deeply impacted by this, and I don't see anything changing based on what's coming forth, and I'll tell you why. Over the past 5 years during the pandemic, the existential crisis of shipping and distribution and logistics has just rained down on us. If you look at every single rail yard in the city of Chicago, including the one that's on the border of the city of Chicago along Ogden Avenue in Cicero, they are all massively expanding capacity. Every single one is expanding capacity so they can manage more containers and drive more trucks on our residential streets. And I say that because I live at 32nd and Lawndale, and I have trucks that drive down our residential street every single day, multiple times a day, to get to the Target warehouse and to get to the Target flow lot that Hilco built. And this reminds me of a meeting I attended in September 2019 in the back room of Second Federal in Little Village. And Hilco, complicit with the aldermen, set up a charrette to walk people around and sell their project. And at that point, there was one brave man who stood up and said, "We don't want your project. We don't need your project. It's not good for us." Ultimately, they didn't care. You can drive past the warehouse and see it now. So I don't see the alderman in this room now. Maybe he was here and left. He's not here now. He wasn't in that room in 2019 either. And basically, we see 31st Street and 26th Street being used as frontage roads for 55. And it's only going to increase. And I think the man over here talked about electric trucks or whatever. That's sugarcoating. I'm not here to sugarcoat it. I've seen all of these rail yards. They are increasing. That is the existential crisis. All of these other things combined with that, we're done. Sorry.
Did you have a question?
No, I didn't have a question.
Okay.
I just want to be clear about what we're actually facing. And it is far worse than anyone is saying right now. And it's only going to get worse.
And if we don't pass this ordinance, it's going to continue to get worse. So what we're trying to prevent with the ordinance is for these industries to not have the cumulative impacts.
But you're not going to change what's happening in these rail yards because they've already expanding and they already have approval to expand and are going to further expand over the next 3 years. So no one is preventing that. No one is preventing that. We don't.
Chris.
So this is a fight. I don't want a pillow. I don't want to get in a pillow fight. I want everyone to kind of get together and really be serious about what we're facing here. And I appreciate all these organizations here and the work you're doing, but there's more to be done, and I guess I want to see more. I want to see more from this in the name of Hazel Johnson. Honestly.
I mean, her daughter endorses the ordinance.
Do we have any comments on the panel? And I did see lots of hands, so I just want to make sure that everyone. I can't reach the, if you can step up.
I'm sorry, there was something that I had as we were reading through the ordinance, and I just wanted to highlight is that, I mean, maybe it's not going to help with like current ones, but it is my understanding, and maybe it's a question for people who wrote the ordinance, that this would also impact any expanding. So if any like current manufacturing polluting company wanted to expand their operations, they would be required to abide by this ordinance's rules, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, because I think that's something that I hadn't heard about that I think is worth highlighting, because I think that does help to take into consideration all of those things that impact our lung health and air pollution. As I mentioned before, the American Lung Association was not a part of crafting this ordinance. I just read that part, and you said you read it too, so I wanted to just highlight that part. But in terms of the, like, as a public health nurse, I can say that policy without implementation is useless, right? So we do need to talk about implementation. I don't know what that process is like, though, so that is not something I can answer back to you, Brian, sorry.
Hi, my name is Siri Chilquary. I am a reporter with Inside Climate News, and I wanted to ask about the co-governance piece. To my understanding, the other forms of cumulative impact bills, statewide and municipally, don't have anything like that, and I just wanted to sort of confirm that, and then also ask a little bit about what that advisory council, what kind of power the advisory council would have.
Yeah, so if I understood the question, you were asking about what the co-governance portion looked like. Yeah, so we've been in this process, I want to say, for at least the last 3 years of sort of studying cumulative impacts in Chicago and developing this ordinance. Back in 2022, we started the cumulative impacts, Chicago Cumulative Impacts Assessment, where we had members of the Environmental Equity Working Group, environmental justice groups that are here now, as well as NGO staff like myself, city officials, all sort of working together in this assessment, studying the pollution burden that existed in Chicago, doing a scan of policies that exist across the nation on the city, state level, and really trying to understand what we could bring to Chicago to better the lives of the citizens here. And so the co-governance portion looked like EJ groups coming to the table, putting their ideas out there, strategizing with the city, and coordinating on what we wanted this ordinance to look like. It looked like it also looked like the community town halls that we had in 2023, and even right now, where residents are coming and expressing themselves and telling us and the city, what they want to see happen in terms of policy. And so co-governance, has definitely been a part of, what we've been doing. There's always room to improve, for sure. But like you said, it doesn't happen in a lot of places. And I think the assessment and this ordinance has been a great first step in trying to realize true community co-governance. And like I said, there's still more room to grow. And what was the second part of your question?
The second part of the question is what type of authority, power would the advisory committee have?
Yeah, so to my knowledge, the advisory board provides recommendations to the zoning approvals board. Am I right? Yeah. And so they, what happens with the ordinance is a cumulative impact study is done, and that cumulative impact study is then sent to the EJ Advisory Board, and the EJ Advisory Board, they review the study, and they themselves make a recommendation on whether or not a development should be approved or whether it shouldn't be approved. That recommendation then goes to the Zoning Approval Board, and they make a decision on, whether or not that approval should go forth. I don't know if Angela might want to follow up or not.
I'll just add that there is also language within the ordinance that holds the city accountable to continued progress, recognizing that this isn't a one and done situation, right? We have been at the table with people in this room for 3 years. We're not leaving this table. There's a real strong interest to make continued progress here. So just that continued momentum and building a public board to hold us accountable on our progress. We've created an EJ action plan at the city where we've asked departments, required departments, every one of our infrastructure departments and a couple of others to say, how can you as a city department operationally reduce your environmental impacts or the burden of pollution that is caused through your work? There are a number of commitments that those departments made, and we want to realize all of them. And so that continued oversight and accountability to a public body is essential to maintain, our commitment to co-governance and our commitment back to the community. And so that's why the board is important to establish, both to provide recommendations for this process, but then to continue to hold us accountable overall.
We have time for one more question. We are wrapping up.
Thank you all so much for sharing today. So one of the things that in my line of work, or I do support work for other environmental justice organizations and coalitions, we have seen that over time there's a shift in the landscape of community engagement where small businesses or local businesses are sometimes have been opposed to these types of improvements and measures. But with the large scale, like micro level encroachment of private equity run businesses or even like fronts, subsidiaries, we are seeing that now, like in other places, small businesses that have traditionally been unaligned with these kinds of concerns are starting to react to even their, I would say their territories being overtaken by even larger and more disinterested layers of players. And my question is in terms of like, just as an additional layer of strategy of motivating more in our communities, what is being done to engage our local small businesses? I'm thinking local daycares. Restaurant owners are parts of our communities. I would really like to hear more about how this is moving, in ever bigger circles here.
And I just want to point out that this ordinance wouldn't be affecting the smaller businesses. It would definitely be triggering more of the high pollution consequential facilities. And so, Angela, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, I think that that's the answer. There is no zoning requirements that small businesses would be subject to this ordinance. This ordinance is directed at the most heavy intensive uses within the city. But to your point, I think that there's such a wide range of feedback that we've received from the business community. We have also, the city of Chicago has something called like local industrial retention initiatives. These nonprofit organizations that that exist to ensure that they are cultivating a robust economy within the business community. So there's a wide range of emotions even within those groups. We have done our work to talk to each Leary, we call them Learys for short, to just hear some feedback and to talk to them about the ordinance. It's been a mixed range of emotions, from people that really want to see big industry come in and really help to support job growth within their community, to people that have expressed concerns about, hey, we don't want to push out the smaller, warehouse distributors, for example, or, the smaller businesses that are just providing food to mom and pop grocery stores. So there's been a range of emotions even with this. I know that what we have done within our team, a couple of just things to note is, for the businesses that have concerns about being pushed out, we're talking to the county about incentives that they have for, again, these are your mom and pop, like good actor businesses within, industrial communities. We are talking to the county about incentives that they have. The county, of course, has the tax incentives, not the city. So we're learning more about that to be able to provide that information. And then within our own department, we have something called the Climate Infrastructure Fund for small businesses. So we do provide grants. We have a grant program for businesses that want to do retrofits, anybody that wants to electrify their fleet, and then also for small businesses that want to advance green infrastructure solutions, so like green roofs and flood mitigation efforts too. We, want to support healthy and robust small businesses, of course, within the city. So we have allocated quite a bit of money to support small businesses in that way, to help them transition, to green technologies and to support nature-based solutions within their properties so that they can sustain themselves in the long term.
All right, that actually wraps up. We are at 8 o'clock, and
Yeah, can we give a hand for this amazing panel? Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Thank you again. I'd like to also thank our all of you, our neighbors. I didn't even do a shout out by neighborhood, but we really appreciate all of you, even if you're coming from across the city, that you made it here. We would like to mention that 3 of the alders were here at the beginning of the meeting, and we want you, if you didn't see your alder person here, or if you don't live in the 11th or 12th ward, we want you to reach out to them and tell them, even if you live in this ward, reach out and tell them you're interested in this ordinance, you want to know how they're voting, you want to know if they're supporting this. We'd also like to thank our wonderful CESI team, the Chicago Coalition to End Sacrifice Zones. And I'll just end, there's a lot of material out on the table, but if you do anything after this meeting, we really appreciate all of you sending this email out to your alder, and that's on this QR code on this piece of paper. Yeah, and take a ward map.
I just wanted to share one more thank you, is the Iron Lab, Merichel, for sharing this space with us. I think this is the perfect and prime example of what we want to start seeing in our communities, is multi-use spaces like this, where we can have our galleries, we can have our meetings, we can have our coffee shops. This is what we want to see done with these types of buildings. This is the kind of engagement that we want. And we are talking as grassroots organizations to businesses in our communities to also get their input and get them involved in this process as well. So and maybe, Fredo, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I just definitely wanted to shout out Merichel and Lalo. Thank you so much for sharing this space with us. We are so grateful to be your tenants, and also for having shared this beautiful, amazing space with all of our guests.
Thank you, and good night.